April 2024, South China Sea, 140 miles east of the Spratly Islands. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the most advanced warship ever built, was conducting routine flight operations. 4,000 sailors, 75 combat aircraft, $13 billion of American naval power. Then, the radar operator saw them. 12 Chinese warships, closing fast. Formation, aggressive. Intent, unclear. What happened next would test the resolve of both superpowers and prove exactly why you don't challenge a Ford-class carrier strike group. This is the story China didn't want you to hear. To understand what happened that day, you need to understand what the USS Gerald R. Ford represents. Commissioned in 2017 after nearly a decade of construction, the Ford is not just an aircraft carrier. It's a floating city, a mobile airbase, a statement of American power projection. At 1,106 feet long and displacing over 100,000 tons, she's powered by 2 nuclear reactors that will run for 50 years without refueling. Her electromagnetic aircraft launch system, EMALS, can hurl a 30-ton fighter jet from 0 to 170 miles per hour in less than 3 seconds. She carries the most advanced radar systems ever installed on a warship. The AN/SPY-3 and AN/SPY-4 can track thousands of targets simultaneously, from ballistic missiles to stealth aircraft. But technology means nothing without the people who operate it. 4,000 sailors, the average age, 23. Many had never seen combat, but they were trained for this exact scenario. Because the South China Sea has become the most dangerous body of water on Earth, China claims nearly the entire sea as its territorial waters, despite an international tribunal ruling those claims illegal. They've built artificial islands, militarized reefs, deployed anti-ship missiles and fighter jets, and they've made it clear American carriers are not welcome. In 2023 alone, Chinese warships and aircraft conducted over 300 unsafe intercepts of U.S. Navy vessels, close passes, radar locks, psychological warfare designed to test American resolve. But the Gerald R. Ford? This was different. This wasn't just another carrier. This was the crown jewel of the U.S. Navy, and China was about to learn why you don't poke the dragon. April 18, 2024, 0600 hours local time. The Ford Carrier Strike Group, including 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser, and a fast attack submarine, was operating in international waters. The mission: freedom of navigation operation. The message: these waters belong to no one. On the flight deck, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen was preparing her F-35C Lightning II for a routine patrol. The 5th-generation stealth fighter was loaded with AMRAAMs and Sidewinders, just in case. In the carrier's Combat Direction Center, radar operators monitored the airspace, routine traffic, fishing vessels, commercial cargo ships. Then, at 0617, everything changed. 12 contacts, bearing 270 degrees, range 95 nautical miles, speed 28 knots, formation, attack pattern. The Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy had arrived. Leading the formation, the Type 055 destroyer Nanchang, China's most advanced warship. Behind her, 2 Type 052D destroyers, 3 Type 054A frigates, and 6 fast attack corvettes. Captain James Hammer Rodriguez, commanding officer of the USS Gerald R. Ford, didn't hesitate. Launch the alert fighters. Bring the battle group to Condition 2. I want eyes on those ships in 10 minutes. Within minutes, 4 FA-18 Super Hornets were airborne, streaking toward the Chinese formation at 600 miles per hour. The game had begun. At 0635, the Super Hornets made visual contact. What they saw was a textbook example of naval intimidation. The Chinese warships had formed a screen, deliberately positioning themselves between the Ford and her planned route. It was a blockade without the declaration, a challenge without words. But words were about to come. The Nanchang broadcast on international maritime frequency. U.S. warship, you are operating in Chinese territorial waters. Alter your course to heading 180. Depart immediately. Captain Rodriguez picked up the handset himself. Chinese warship Nanchang. This is the USS Gerald R. Ford. We are operating in international waters as permitted under international law. We will not alter course. Recommend you maintain safe distance. Silence. Then, at 6:42, the Chinese made their move. Two J-15 fighter jets, launched from the carrier Shandong, screamed toward the Ford at low altitude. Speed, Mach 1.2. Intent, harassment. The Ford's air defense systems tracked them instantly. Missiles ready. But Rodriguez held fire. This was a test. Instead, he ordered something far more intimidating. Launch the CAP package. Within 90 seconds, 8 more aircraft were airborne. 4 Super Hornets. 4 F-35s. The F-35s, invisible to Chinese radar, positioned themselves behind the J-15. The Chinese pilots had no idea they were already locked on. One of the American pilots, callsign Reaper, broke radio silence. Chinese aircraft, be advised, you have 4 F-35s on your 6. We have tone. Recommend you RTB immediately. The effect was instantaneous. The J-15S broke off. They had no idea where the F-35s were. And in modern air combat, not knowing is fatal. Round 1, United States. But China wasn't done. At 0710, the Chinese formation began closing the distance. The Nanchang activated her Type 346B radar and locked onto the Ford. In naval warfare, radar lock is an aggressive act. It means weapon systems are tracking you. Rodriguez knew exactly what this meant. He chose option 3. Weapons free on defensive systems only. Launch chaff. Activate electronic warfare suite. What happened next was a masterclass in electronic warfare. The Ford's ANSLQ-32 system detected the Nanchang's radar emissions and responded with overwhelming jamming. To the Chinese radar operators, their screens suddenly filled with hundreds of false targets. At the same time, the American destroyers maneuvered into flanking positions. Their radars locked onto every Chinese warship simultaneously. The message was clear. You locked us. We locked all of you. For 3 minutes, the two fleets held each other at electronic gunpoint. Then, a transmission broke through. But to truly understand why China's challenge failed, we need to examine the technology gap. A gap that's wider than most people realize. The USS Gerald R. Ford isn't just incrementally better than previous carriers. She represents a paradigm shift in naval warfare. Let's start with the most visible difference: the electromagnetic aircraft launch system. EMALS. Traditional steam catapults used on carriers since World War II are brutal machines. They slam aircraft forward with explosive force, putting immense stress on airframes. They require constant maintenance. They waste energy, and they can't adjust power for different aircraft weights. EMALS changes everything. Using electromagnetic linear motors, the same technology behind maglev trains, EMALS accelerates aircraft smoothly, efficiently, and precisely. It can launch a 30-ton FA-18 or a 70-ton E-2D Hawkeye with equal ease. The result? Less stress on aircraft means longer service life. Less maintenance means higher sortie rates. And precise power control means safer launches. During the South China Sea encounter, EMALS launched 68 aircraft without a single failure. That's not luck. That's engineering. But the technological advantage doesn't stop there. The Ford's dual-band radar system, combining the AN/SPY-3X band and AN/SPY-4S band radars, creates an unprecedented detection capability. X-band provides precision targeting and fire control. S-band provides long-range volume search. Together, they can simultaneously track over 16,000 targets, from sea-skimming missiles to satellites in low Earth orbit. The Chinese Type 055 destroyer Nanchang has the Type 346B radar, an impressive system that can track around 300 targets. But 300 versus 16,000, there's no comparison. This is why, when the Nanchang attempted to lock onto the Ford, American electronic warfare systems could respond so decisively. The Ford's sensors saw everything. Every Chinese ship, every aircraft, every radar emission. And then there's the air wing. The F-35C Lightning II is more than a fighter jet. It's a flying sensor platform, a data node, a quarterback for the entire battle network. Each F-35C collects information from its advanced sensors, radar, infrared, electronic warfare systems, and shares it instantly with every other platform in the strike group. It's called sensor fusion, and it creates a shared picture of the battlefield that's updated in real time. When those F-35s positioned themselves behind the Chinese J-15 fighters, the American pilots could see everything. The J-15's altitude, speed, heading, weapons load, and even the radio frequencies they were using. The Chinese pilots? They couldn't see the F-35s at all. Not on radar, not visually, nothing. That's the difference between 4th generation and 5th generation aircraft. It's not just stealth, it's information dominance. Commander Michael Viper Thompson, an F-35C squadron commander who flew during the encounter, later explained, "We weren't just invisible. We were orchestrating the entire engagement. We could see their formation, predict their moves, and position ourselves perfectly. They were playing checkers. We were playing 3D chess." But perhaps the most significant technological advantage is the one you can't see: the Ford's Advanced Arresting Gear, AAG. Traditional arresting cables use hydraulics to stop landing aircraft. It works, but it's violent. Pilots experience up to 6 Gs of deceleration. Aircraft take punishment. Cables break. AAG uses a water turbine and electromagnetic controls to provide smooth, controlled deceleration. Less stress on pilots, less wear on aircraft, and critically, faster reset time between recoveries. The Ford can recover an aircraft every 30 seconds. China's Liaoning and Shandong carriers? About every 90 seconds. Over the course of that 42-minute recovery operation, this seemingly small difference allowed the Ford to recover all 68 aircraft. A Chinese carrier would still be recovering aircraft an hour later. In combat, that difference is the margin between victory and defeat. Now, it's important to acknowledge, China's Navy has made remarkable progress. 20 years ago, the plan was a coastal defense force with obsolete Soviet-era ships. Today, it's the largest navy in the world by hull count, with modern destroyers, advanced submarines, and growing carrier capabilities. The Type 055 destroyer is a genuinely impressive warship. 11,000 tons, 112 vertical launch cells, sophisticated sensors. If the Chinese had fielded these ships in 2000, they would have been the most advanced surface combatants on Earth. But they didn't field them in 2000. They fielded them in 2020. And by 2020, the United States had already moved to the next generation. This is the paradox of military competition. By the time you match your opponent's current capability, they've already advanced to the next level. China's carriers, the Liaoning and Shandong, are based on 1980s Soviet designs. They use ski jump launches instead of catapults, which limits their combat radius. Their J-15 fighters are capable, but they're 4th-generation aircraft facing 5th-generation opponents. China's 3rd carrier, the Fujian, features electromagnetic catapults, similar to the Ford, but it's still undergoing sea trials. It won't be operational for years, and by then, the US Navy will have 2 Ford-class carriers in service, with 3 more under construction. The technology gap isn't closing, it's widening. But technology alone doesn't win wars. Experience matters, and this is where America's advantage becomes truly overwhelming. The crew of the USS Gerald R. Ford has decades of institutional knowledge to draw upon. The US Navy has been conducting carrier operations continuously since 1942. That's 82 years of lessons learned, tactics refined, procedures perfected. When Captain Rodriguez ordered the maximum sortie rate demonstration, he was executing doctrine developed over 8 decades. Every sailor on that flight deck knew their role because they'd practiced it thousands of times. China's carrier pilots have been operating for less than 10 years. Their procedures are new. Their doctrine is untested. Their institutional knowledge is shallow. During the encounter, Chinese aircraft maintained textbook formations and followed conservative intercept profiles. They were professional but predictable. American pilots exploited that predictability. They used techniques developed during the Cold War, refined in the Persian Gulf, and perfected through constant training. They flew like students, one American pilot said later. good students, but students. We flew like professors. This doesn't make Chinese forces incompetent. It makes them inexperienced. And in military operations, experience is measured in lives saved and battles won. The final element is nuclear power. The Ford's two A-1B reactors will run for 50 years without refueling. They generate enough power to supply a city of 100,000 people, and they provide unlimited range. The Ford can sail anywhere, indefinitely, limited only by food and supplies for the crew. China's carriers are conventionally powered. They need to refuel every few thousand miles. This constrains their operational radius and requires a vast logistical network of oilers and supply ships. In a sustained operation, like the 12-day freedom of navigation mission the Ford completed after the encounter, this difference becomes decisive. The Ford maintained station. Chinese ships had to rotate out for refueling. Sustained presence requires sustained power, and nuclear reactors provide exactly that. So when China challenged the USS Gerald R. Ford, they weren't just challenging one ship. They were challenging 8 decades of carrier aviation experience, 5 generations of technological advancement, and the industrial capacity of a nation that's been building supercarriers for 70 years. It wasn't a fair fight. And that's exactly the point. Today, the USS Gerald R. Ford continues her mission as the flagship of American naval power. She patrols the world's oceans, a floating fortress representing American commitment to international order. The encounter with the Chinese Navy in April 2024 was not the first test she's faced, and it certainly won't be the last. Because the question at the heart of 21st century geopolitics remains unresolved. Will China respect international law, or will rising power inevitably challenge the existing order? The answer may determine whether this century sees peace or conflict on a scale we haven't witnessed since 1945. But one thing is certain: when challengers test American resolve, they face not just technology or firepower, but 4,000 sailors who volunteer to stand the watch. 4,000 men and women who maintain readiness 24 hours a day, who train for moments of crisis, who believe their mission matters. And they're backed by technology that represents the absolute cutting edge of human engineering, systems so advanced that adversaries can't match them, even when they know exactly how they work. Because ultimately, the power of the USS Gerald R. Ford isn't measured in displacement tons or aircraft capacity. It's measured in the willingness of free people to defend the principle that the oceans belong to everyone, not to whoever has the largest fleet or the loudest claims. On April 18, 2024, China challenged that principle. It was a big mistake, not because America sought confrontation, but because when freedom of navigation is tested, the United States Navy doesn't blink. The Ford steamed through those contested waters and completed her mission. The message sent was louder than any weapon fired. These waters are free, and they will remain free. This is the lesson China learned the hard way. You can challenge American power, but you cannot break American resolve. And you cannot defeat technology, experience, and capability refined over 8 decades of carrier operations. The South China Sea remains contested, tensions remain high, and future encounters are inevitable. But the next time a nation considers challenging a U.S. carrier strike group, they'll remember what happened when China challenged the Ford. They'll remember the technology gap, the experience gap, the capability gap, and they'll think twice. If you enjoyed this deep dive into modern naval operations, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay sharp.